Hey friends, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be showing you how to build our FT Mighty Mini Japanese Zero. Now the really cool thing about this is this has all the cool features of many of our Master series, but it's not complicated to build. We worked with our dear friend John Overstreet to design this, so it kind of mixes in a lot of our basic techniques from our swappable airplanes where the planes fold together, but also we have some molding and stuff that can be done that's very easy to do that gives you these beautiful curves and scaled looks. Now this plane's only going to take you about 3 hours to build, and it is available as our speed build kit. Now if you guys haven't seen this plane fly, it is an absolute joy in the air. This powers off of our Power Pack F, and it's also 3S and 4S capable. Just make sure if you're going to be flying off a 4-cell that you go down 1 inch in diameter on the prop to get that amazing speed, but not that excessive heat. Now this is going to be a plane that's going to also be able to take our FT Aura 5, so if you're new to flying, or if you want to fly in windier conditions, the FT Aura 5 is going to give you the ability to have a great trainer experience and eventually switch over to having that smooth, awesome flight characteristics and also enable you to fly in windier weather. Now along with our speed build kit, we're also going to be including in our kits an awesome decal sheet that's going to give you the ability to really add some beautiful scale detail very quickly and easily. All you have to do is scuff the plane, paint it, and stick on the decals. So if you guys are ready to get started, let's go ahead and grab our speed build kit, our Power Pack F, and our radios, and we'll get started. So in this portion of the video, we're going to be building the wings of our FT Mini Zero. The first thing we want to do is identify the components we're going to need, pop them out carefully, and then we're going to go back and identify them all. With these smaller planes, it's oftentimes easier just to use a little razor blade and just cut the tabs carefully. These will also rock and pop loose if you want as well. We have all the pieces popped out for our wings. Let's go ahead and take a moment to make sure yours look exactly like this and also identify them at the same time. First, right in front of me here is our wooden spar. That's going to give us strength to keep the wings from folding. Along with that, we have our foam spars that the wood spar is going to double up against. Now in the center section here, we have our formers that are going to help the wing fasten into the fuselage. You're also going to notice that we have those numbered 1 through 5. It's really important when we glue these formers together that we stack them in the right order to be able to make room for the servos, the Aura light, and everything to pass through easily. This is a really cool setup that John Overstreet designed. Along with that, we have our main outer left and right wings that we have to my left and right. Feel free to pause your video to make sure all your pieces look just like this, and then we're going to go ahead and move forward and then start gluing our formers together. Alright, so I got plenty of glue in my hot glue gun. And one thing I like to do with the variable temperature hot glue gun, I'm just going to set this just below medium here, right at medium. It's going to give a nice smooth stream of glue, but it's also going to dry very quickly. It's really helpful to have an adjustable temperature glue gun. If you guys don't have a glue gun yet, the FT300 is a really good solution for you. So the way we're going to stack this is we're going to start with number 1 former. We're going to leave that firmly on the table here. The second one is going to just stack straight on top of that, and you're going to see the only difference here is it doesn't have the side wings. Now it's really important whenever you're putting glue on, avoid the perforated edges because we're eventually going to be cutting those out. So let's go ahead and glue that on right now. Now I'm going to fever my glue just around the outer edge. And then right in the middle here. Just take that down right on top. I want to put all my energy into making sure that I line up the 4 corners. This is going to be how your wing gets its alignment to your fuselage, so it's really important here that you make sure that you align everything and take your time doing so. There's the first former down. The second former looks much different here. You're going to notice here that we have a kind of a section for our servo, and it's a little bit bigger. So what I like to do is I like to put it in place and then look at the bottom and take special note on what's not there. So basically what I want to do is I want to go around the full perimeter again, and I only want to get to where it's going to touch here. So the easier thing to do on this one would it be just a little drop of glue here, and then I'm going to go ahead, bead of glue, and another bead of glue. Flip this over, kind of smear it around just for a couple seconds. Then we're going to go right back up and line everything again. Alright, our next former is former number 3, so you can see we're going 1, 2, 3, and this is number 4. We're going to lay this again right on top. Take special note on what's not being glued and what is being glued. And for this instance, I can simply go ahead, go right around the perimeter. we are. And our last former. It's kind of our little cap former here. Look up from the bottom. Again, all we need to do is just go right around the perimeter. Go. Press that down right into place. So our center section's all nice and done. So you can see here we have our section for our receiver or our ORL5. We have our section for our servos. We have pass-throughs right here. We even have options where you can put magnets in if you want to make your hatch magnetic, and also release for our servo push rods. Now that we have our section all done, let's go ahead and remove the foam from the areas we need for the main spar and the push rods. So the first one's going to be the main spar here, and I'm just going to use like a little sawing motion with my razor blade. We'll just pop out this little groove on both sides. And then for the push rod relief, we're going to be going through 2 layers of foam. There's 1, there's 2. And then we can just use our spar here and pop those out. All right, now with our center section done, let's go ahead and put this aside and we'll start working on our wings. First step in preparing our wings is we're gonna go ahead and cut a double bevel right on this leading edge here. To do a cup double bevel, we're gonna fold this 180 degrees. Then I'm just gonna take it against the table here, and we're gonna hold the knife blade at over a 45-degree angle, just like you see here, and that's gonna make it guide nice and clean. We're gonna be very careful to keep the knife from cutting through the paper on the center side, and we're gonna cut a nice, simple bevel. Now don't be afraid to go over this a couple different times if you have to get the shape that you want. And the other side. So notice I'm not holding my knife like this, I'm holding it at a nice sharp angle. That way it glides nice and easy. And right to the edge. Now before we go ahead and remove some paper here to mold our wings, I'm just going to go ahead and fold this over very slowly, almost to flat, just to kind of get the wing kind of memorized in that shape that we want to go at. It's going to be a lot easier to do that right now than it will be to do it later. Once we've done that, we're going to carefully go ahead and just glide right along this edge line. Just below the surface of the paper. And then we can come back and carefully remove the paper from the upper wing skin. Our next step here is we're going to take this to the table and we're going to slowly put the airfoil in. And to do this, we're going to lay this on the table and we're simply going to go ahead and press down with our thumbs and our fingers, kind of roll this over the edge. Take your time, do a little bit at a time. There we go. You can see even without the spar, the wing is starting to take shape nicely. Our next step is to glue our spar in. Now you're going to notice something very important here. You want to glue your spar in, but you also want to line up the very far edge as you see right here. Now the spar can go in 2 different directions. One direction is going to make it where the servo centers nicely, and the other is not. So what we want is we want it so the gap here hooks around where the servo is going to be going through very nicely, just like that. It's really important that you don't bring this to the edge here. You bring this to the edge on the far side and line up perfectly. You're going to have roughly about a 1/4 inch of a gap on this edge, and you'll see why in just a moment. Once you line that up, take a simple bead of glue, lay it right down on the table. Again, I'm putting all my time in making sure that that far corner is lined up perfectly. Just line up the edge lines right over top. There we go. If you haven't already done so, let's go ahead and remove our little servo hole so we can open that up put that to the side. Let's go ahead and do the exact same process now on the other side of the wing. First, we're going to cut our double bevel into our leading edge. To cut a double bevel, we're going to hold our razor blade over a 45-degree angle and be careful not to cut through the center section of the paper. Once you've done your double bevel on one side, repeat the same process on the upper surface of the wing. After you cut your double bevel, go ahead and use the tip of your razor blade to cut just through the surface of your paper over the etch line by the trailing edge of the upper skin of the wing. Then carefully remove the top skin of the paper. Once the top skin of the inside of your wing is removed, you're going to go ahead and mold that against the table here to give yourself an airfoil shape. Take your time and use your hands to kind of press down and curl around the edge of your table until your wing has a nice airfoil. Next, we're going to align our spar to the etch marks on the bottom surface of the inside of the wing. Make sure you take time to line up your spar on the indicator marks on the bottom surface of your wing, making sure that you line it up perfectly with the outer portion of the wing and leave about a 1/4 inch gap from where the spar is from the inside core of the wing. Once you're happy with the alignment, go ahead and glue your spar down and hold it in place. And just like before, we're going to go ahead and remove our little servo hole if you haven't already done so. Now that we have our wing sections done, we're going to go ahead and put our attention towards the servos. The reason for this is our servos are actually going to be built inside of our wings. For this, we're going to be using our 9051 FT servos here. These are good for Power Pack A and Power Pack F planes. We standardize all of our electronics here to make sure that you guys can swap your electronics from plane to plane as simply as possible. Now, unfortunately, these ones are going to be glued inside your airplane, so we do want to make sure we take a couple steps before we go ahead and install them. Mainly, we want to make sure they're centered. So before we move on any further, we're going to identify the servo arm that we want, and we're also going to center our servos, and then we're going to install it inside of our wing. So the servo arm that we're going to use in this one is going to be this 4-prong servo arm here. Now we only need one side for that, so we're going to cut off the 3 remaining sides. So let's go ahead and do that right now. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So you can see that there's a lot of different options for servo arms here that are included with your servo. The reason we're going to be avoiding these ones here is I want some nice beefy servo arms to be able to withstand the belly landing that this plane's going to have. Also, these holes line up perfectly to match the deflection that's going to give you the best flight experience. Our next step is to go ahead and use our servo centering tool. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and plug in my balance lead of my battery here. Notice I'm using the positive lead from my battery and I'm leaving the negative dark lead all the way towards the bottom. This is going to give us approximately 1 cell of battery, and that's going to be about 3.7 volts. It's going to work out perfectly. I'm also going to turn my little servo centering tool to neutral, and then we're going to plug this in. There we go. So for my servo, this is going to mount just like this, and therefore I want my servo arm to point down towards the bottom skin of the wing. Once we have our servo arm in place, I'm just going to keep it under neutral, and I'm going to carefully screw this in, making sure I don't strip out any gears on my servo. You can also just test this out. And that's perfect. Now we can unplug this. So now I'm going to take my servo that's already been pre-centered with my arm. I'm just going to carefully rotate this 90 degrees just so I can set this into place. Later on, once we power it up, everything's going to go ahead and rotate down, and we can then make our adjustments. I'm going to go and just do a quick test fit. Once we're happy with that test fit, I'm just going to go ahead and trace the perimeter of this with a little bit of glue, kind of letting some of that glue squeeze in between the servo. And I'm going to hold it firmly against the bottom of the table and let it fully dry. Give this about 45 seconds, maybe sing "You Are My Sunshine" in your head. So before we move on, we're just going to go ahead and do a quick test fit after we've glued our servos in, just to make sure we're happy with the way our wing looks. So we're just going to fold this over, and we should see a nice airfoiled shape just like you see here. Once you're happy with that, go ahead and take your razor blade and just cut this down to the surface of the paper right here and remove the excess. This piece is eventually going to fold over and just be a reinforcement piece right here to keep the leading edge from ripping. Right, same process on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and open up my servo. One important note here, make sure you hold on to your servo screws during these steps, because we're going to repurpose those servo screws to actually mount our motor onto our firewall. You'll see how that works when we build our fuselage. Same process. 1, 2, and 3. Now this servo is going to be mounted in a different orientation, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug that into my servo centering tool once again. Ground's on the bottom. This is going to mount in here like this. Our servo needs to point down. So now we're nice and centered. You can see if I test it. Right back to center. Once we have our servo arm in place, I'm just going to keep it under neutral, and I'm going to carefully screw this in, making sure I don't strip out any gears on my servo. Now we can unplug this. I'm just going to go ahead and plug my servo centering tool as well. Put that aside. Now we're going to carefully rotate this up towards the leading edge, just nice and flat. I'm going to press this down in place, and I'm going to secure it with glue, push between the surface of the bottom of the wing and the gap in the servo. There we go. I'll hold that against the table. Everything's flat against the table there. Maybe wiggle around just a little bit, make sure we're not accidentally gluing it to the table. And then give this about 45 seconds to dry. So before we move on, we're just gonna go ahead and do a quick test fit after we've glued our servos in, just to make sure we're happy with the way our wing looks. So we're just gonna fold this over, and we should see a nice airfoiled shape, just like you see here. Once you're happy with that, go ahead and take your razor blade and just cut this down to the surface of the paper right here and remove the excess. All right, I'm gonna save these extra control horns and servo screws in one of the boxes, and we'll just put that aside. It looks like everything's nice and dry now. Let's go ahead and mount our center section. Before you mount your center section, you're gonna notice that there's a flat portion to our spar that you can see right here. We're gonna go ahead and take that flat portion, we're gonna flip it upside down, and we're just gonna mount our spar just in like you see here. If you have trouble seeing where the spar bends, just hold it against the table, and where it leaves the table, just mark it with a little bit of a pencil or a pen. All right, I can see that pretty good. I'm just gonna put a drop on each side here, one here, one here. There's my marks. Just gonna press it right down in there, and we'll let it dry. Now that's dried, we can flip this over. And you're gonna see some etch marks here that we carefully wanna take note of. So you're gonna see some indicator marks here, here, around the spar, and also a little tiny one on the leading edge. This is where we're gonna be mounting and lining up our center section. So take your time, do a quick practice fold, and take quick note to make sure everything lines up perfectly. There we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my glue down here on the center section, all the way up on the edge, all the way up there. Right back down. You got plenty of time to work with this. Just gonna make sure it lines up as perfectly as possible. There we go. All right, that's one side down. Let's go ahead and do the other side. We'll just line this up here. Again, take a look at all the different marks on the leading edge, trailing edge. There's that one mark up there. That looks good. And I'm gonna secure it with glue. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my glue down here on the center section, all the way up on the edge. Just gonna make sure it lines up as perfectly as possible, and we'll let it dry. Now that we have both sections of our wing attached, we're gonna go ahead and concentrate on putting dihedral into the wing. Dihedral is gonna give that awesome self-stabilizing tendency and make the plane a lot more stable and also more scale looking. So we're gonna go ahead and lift this up, but included in our kit, we have these little dihedral gauges here. They're gonna actually clip on to the very wing tips on the lower surface of the wing. Just like that. It's gonna kind of make it a little bit easier for us to get everything positioned the way we want it, and to also hold it in position. So let's go ahead and just clip this on the trailing edge of the wing. We'll make sure that our little servos aren't blocking anything. And then we're gonna push this down into place. Once we're happy with the way that looks, we're gonna concentrate a bead of glue on the back surface of each spar, and then we're gonna go ahead and press the center section down against the table and hold that firm for at least a minute. So let's go ahead and put a nice bead of glue there, and a nice bead of glue on the other side. Take it to our table, make sure our servos aren't kind of in the way here, and we're going to hold this down. What we're really looking for is for the alignment of both our wooden and our foam spars to line up against each other, and the wooden spars are actually going to establish the proper angle of dihedral that we're looking for. The outer wing gauges just kind of make our job a little bit easier holding it in the position so we don't burn our fingers. Now you're going to notice that after it's fully dried, when I release it, it's going to kind of spring up here to the exact dihedral that we're really looking for it to be. We can now go ahead and remove these dihedral gauges. We could even use these later as squeegees. Now we have two servo wires here that we're going to need to have pass through. And what we want to do is we want to actually pass this through to be able to go inside the fuselage and eventually hook up to either our Aura 5 board or a receiver. For that, all we need to do is simply mark where we want to pass through and then use an included barbecue skewer to pop through the side of the foam and then pass our wires through. We wanted to keep this area strong, so all we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and go right behind this section here, and we're just simply going to poke a couple different holes and open up a spot for our servos to pass through. Kind of poke that through. Same process on the other side. Just kind of go right parallel with the spar here. I like to just pop out 3 different holes. Just wiggle it back and forth. There we go. To make sure that we get everything we need lengthwise, we can just simply put a little tiny piece of tape right here to make sure that our servos don't kind of retract in as we're folding our wings together. We can leave this in. We don't need to worry about kind of recovering that tape either. There we go. I'm just going to tuck these up in so they don't dent the bottom of our fuselage. There we go. Now with our dihedral established, we get to do the fun part here. We're going to do one last test fit just to make sure that we're satisfied with the way it looks. And notice with the center section here, we're going to kind of fold this down right over top, and then we're going to roll the rest of the wing down just like you see here. Make sure that you're very happy with your leading edge and the way everything fits. You should have a nice tight seam right up against those formers, and everything should fold down nice and easy against the trailing edge and the main spar. Once you're happy with that, make sure that you have plenty of hot glue in your glue gun. We're going to go ahead and put a nice rich bead right down the leading edge, a bead down the main spar. I'm just going to go ahead and drizzle a little bit over here, and then also a bead down our trailing edge, both in front of the aileron and the trailing edge by the core of the wing. Again, I'm just going to kind of rotate this portion in first. We're going to fold this down, and using the flats of my hands, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cover the whole entire wing and then press it firmly against the bottom of the table, making sure that that trailing edge is not lifted up. Bring that trailing edge all the way against the bottom of the table, and when the glue is dried, it'll kind of find its position once you're done. Alright, same process now on the other side here. We're just going to do a quick test fit. And I kind of roll this in a little bit first, let it get to the back trailing edge, and then I can force it down just like that. That looks good. My leading edge is nice and sharp. Everything looks good. Just going to do a little bit more molding on this trailing tip right here. Just kind of get that angle established. There we go. Alright. Healthy bead of glue right down the leading edge. Right down the top of the foam spar. Just drizzle some right over here. And then we have the trailing edge in the center section, and then just in front of the aileron. No need to rush any of this. Take your time. There we go. And again, I'm just using the flats of my hands. I'm not pointing down with my fingers or putting any dents in the foam. And we're going to give this about a minute and a half to fully dry. Alright, so that looks really good here. Our wings are looking good. Now you're going to notice here that we still don't have everything firmly attached to the center section. To finish this off, I'm just going to take one of our scrap pieces of foam, cut a nice little bevel like you see right here. And then what I want to do is I'm going to take my glue gun, put a nice healthy bead of glue right over that center section. I'm actually going to use this sharper one. And I'm going to carefully press this down in, kind of opening it up, and letting that joint fully dry. We're going to do this on both sides and let it fully cure, and this is going to give your wing a ton of strength. So I'm going to take my glue gun, put a nice healthy bead of glue right over that center section, kind of opening it up, and I'm going to carefully press this down in, and letting that joint fully dry. Now that we have our main wing section done, we're going to go ahead and put our attention now towards the servos. The really cool thing about doing this now is it's going to really help speed up the final process of this plane, which typically is around the electronics. So let's go ahead and get our servo centering tool back again. We'll get our little battery, and we're going to hook up our 2 servo leads to the servo centering tool, and then recenter our servos before we move on. We're going to go ahead and put this in neutral here. And again, I'm only going to use 1 cell of the battery, which means I'm going to put the furthest positive lead and the next one down right there. See, both of our servos are now going to pop out just like that. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this plugged in for right now. That's going to make it easy so these guys aren't going to move. Just be careful that you don't accidentally strip them out by forcing them to do anything. In our kit, you're going to locate 2 of the 4 control horns. Those 2 control horns are going to be right here. I'm just going to go ahead and just gently place those into position with a little rocking motion right through the slot. Now also included in our kit are going to be the push rods here. For this push rod, we're going to go to the lowest hole closest to the servo screw right here. We're not going to go to the outer one. We only need the inner one. Just going to rotate that carefully. And with our control horn in place and the hole on our control horn being right over where the hinge line is going to be, all we need to do is grab the wire just ahead of the hole. I'm going to grab it right there. We're going to bend that 90 degrees in. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my pliers, and I'm going to grip it about 2 millimeters in, maybe 3. I'm going to bend it straight up. Once we have that bent straight up, I'm going to go up about 1/4 of an inch, or 4 or 5 millimeters, and cut that off. Now I can carefully remove my push rod, grip it by my pliers, and I'm going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees, and that's going to finish off our push rod. Let's go ahead and give this a quick test fit here. We're just going to go ahead and slide this right on through. We're going to lift up our control horn. Going to slide this carefully through just like that and put it right down in place. And that looks wonderful. Now keep in mind you have plenty of push rod material. If this is too long or too short, go ahead and go back and remake that. You have plenty of opportunities to get it right. The better you do your push rods, the better the flying experience is going to be. Once we're happy with this, we're going to simply flip this over. I'm going to go ahead and take my razor blade, and I'm just going to carefully cut down the score cut, not cutting through the paper, all the way to the other side. Now I can go ahead and open this up 180 degrees. I'm just going to go ahead and remove my battery here just to make things a little bit easier for you guys to see. And then I'm going to carefully cut a single bevel cut on the aileron side. Just keep it just above the paper. As we get to this edge, I'm just going to kind of pull down just like that. I'm just going to turn this 180 degrees. Always look ahead of your blade just to make sure to see where you're cutting. And I'm just going to use a little bit of a saw motion here. And that's just going to make it cut through nice and easy. What you want to see is you want to see easy deflection both directions here. If it feels like it's binding on the way down, go ahead and remove a little bit more meat right on your hinge line here until you have nice easy deflection and you don't have to force anything. And I'm just going to put a gentle little bead right on the hinge line like you see here. And then I'm going to come back with a piece of scrap foam and I'm going to scrape pretty much all of it off. What I'm looking to do here is to push the hot glue right into that hinge line and right into that foam, but not to leave any residual left over. Let this fully dry before you move on and make sure that you don't have any kind of buildup on your hinge line or it's going to cause it to bind. That's nice and dry and it moves nice and easy. Now we take our control horn and we're going to put it back in place, and once again I'm going to verify that the hole of my control horn is directly over my hinge line. Once we're happy with that, we can go ahead and glue that down. Little drop of glue. Just gonna lift that up just slightly, right there. And we're done. Let's go ahead and repeat the exact same process now on the other side. Same process as before. We're gonna go ahead and sit down our little control horn. Little rocking motion's all you need. And I'm just going to go ahead and use the extra here. You can use one of our control horns with the pre-bent Z-bend, but now that we know how to make our Z-bends, we can just use the extra and save the extra material for later. And we're going to pass it through the lowest hole. This is going to give us about 12 to 14 degrees deflection. That's exactly what we want for this Mini. I'm just going to plug my battery in here on my servo centering tool one more time, just to make life a little bit easier. Kind of hold it in place. And we're just going to go ahead and grip the wire just at the very front of the hole. That way the radius of the wire is going to make it pass right on through. We'll bend it over nice and clean, 90 degrees. We'll grip it about 3 millimeters or so in, and then we'll bend that vertical. Now we can go ahead and release our push rod. I'll go ahead and cut this. And then we'll grip this, just slowly bend it about 90 degrees, just like that. Again, take your time making these push rods. If you ever have to remake it, it'll be far easier for you than if you have to make those adjustments into your servos later. There we go, we're gonna pass this right on through. Just do a quick test, make sure everything still lines up really nice. There we go. Right back in there, that's perfect. Now we can flip this over 180 degrees. I'm gonna go ahead and carefully make sure that our hinge line is fully cut through. We can open this up now, just like that. Just notice I'm kind of using just a simple slide motion here. We'll build up right there. There we go. And we have good deflection. Reinforce our hinge, a little bead of hot glue. And come back with a scrap piece of foam. Use like a squeegee and wipe off all the extra. Just push that glue right down into the paper, into the foam. One last test fit. Notice that we still have our servo centering tool turned on. We're just gonna line this up perfectly with the trailing edge. Perfect. Come back with our glue. And set it right down in place. Give this plenty of time to fully dry. You don't want to rush the glue drying in this area, because if you lose that connection or the strength in there, you're also going to lose your control. Now, we included in our kit a couple other items that are really going to help you have both durability and also appearance. One's going to be these end wing tips. You can use a glue stick and actually peel the paper off and fasten these little pieces of paper right down on the bottom surface of your wing. Now, personally, I just go ahead and paint it, and I'm not too worried about that, but we did include that just to kind of give you a little bit more quality in that area. Also, a very important part that I would strongly encourage you to do is to go ahead and pop out these two pieces here, and where these are going to go is they can either go right next to or right in front of your servo. What this is going to do is when you land on something, say like your textile runway or grass, it's going to keep grass blades from catching that and tearing up your servo and possibly even breaking it. I like to go ahead and put it right in the line of the wing, just like this. Other people may prefer to have it at a slight angle, kind of protecting the servo. My logic is that anything that's going to hit this is going to ride right over top of the servo, and so far it's been working really good. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue that down right now. Just line up right in front of the servo. And notice that I'm kind of keeping that line in the direction of the wingtip on the bottom surface. While we're on this wing, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this little tiny piece of paper here. Put a little drop of glue. We'll use a scrap piece of foam and we'll fold it over. Let's do the same process now on the other side, and our wing will be done. And same on this side. Our wing is now done. We're ready to move on to the next step, which is building our fuselage. So in this portion of the video, we're going to be showing you guys how to build the fuselage of the airplane. The really cool thing about this is although this airplane is very smooth and molded together, it's incredibly easy to build. And you're going to see that the common techniques kind of bridge between the swappable series and also our masters. So if you built either one of those series, you're going to be really comfortable in this. The first thing we want to do is identify the components we're going to need, pop them out carefully, and then we're going to go back and identify them all. And we're going to leave the cockpit and some of the other accessories here that are going to go on after the fuselage and the plane are assembled. We're just going to go ahead and leave those aside right now, just so we don't lose them. Alright, so we have our main pieces for our fuselage laid out. Let's go ahead and identify those here. First, we have the main rear skin of our fuselage. We have the two formers that are going to go with it. We have our center spine of the rear portion of the fuselage. This is actually going to help us attach it to the actual wing. We have our front top nose detail. We have our main power pod box. This is actually going to be inside the front portion of the fuselage, and a lot of our formers are going to attach to it. And again, this will also help us attach it to the wing. To go with our servo box, we also have our front former, and then we have our front nose detail. Along with that, we also have an included coffee stir guide. This is basically going to be our servo guide here, and it may be different colors, maybe black, maybe white, maybe red. It's going to just be internal, and it's going to help guide our servo, so make sure you have that along with our included pushrod wire. And then we have our front outer skin. And also very important detail is going to be our firewall. Now, if you built Mighty Minis before, you're going to notice that this firewall looks very different. The really cool thing about this firewall is it's going to give us the ability to attach and service our motors, but it's also going to open up the internal portion of this airplane incredibly well. Go ahead and take your time and make sure that you have all these pieces, and then we're going to go ahead and put our attention towards the rear portion of the fuselage first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and put glue, avoiding the little hash marks in the middle here, and we're going to glue the two formers together. Just slide this back and forth, and we'll just let that dry. Let's go ahead and put our attention towards the rear skin of the fuselage here. First, we're going to peel the paper off of the center section. Leave the paper on these outer two portions that you see here. Now on our fuselage, you're going to notice that there's a tick mark in the very front and also in the very back. We're going to go ahead and establish kind of a curve on that tick mark as we see it right now. So we'll take this to the edge of the table, and we're going to carefully go ahead and start folding it down. And once we get to about 90 degrees, I'm just going to go ahead and start rolling this. Now notice that I'm kind of rolling in proportion, so when I'm about 50% through this line from the edge, I'm also about 50% through this line here. And don't try to do it in one motion. Just go ahead and go back from the middle. This table is our friend. And we're going to take this all the way to the point of where we see this here. Do it another time. Notice I'm kind of now pulling it down, just kind of taking my time. Notice whenever I'm doing this, I'm always using the flats of my hands. I'm never putting sharp pressure on any portion. I'm just putting nice even pressure on all sides. There we go. When we're done with this, we should be able to easily roll this back and forth with our hands all the way through with no problem at all. Our next step is cut a double bevel on both score cuts on both sides of the fuselage. So I'm just going to make sure I have the dull tip here of my knife. I'm just going to go right down the score line. I'm going to open it up 180 degrees. There's one bevel. And there's the second. We want this to get at least 90 degrees from where you see on the very back edge that you see here. Same process on the other side. We'll fold this over 180 degrees. Let's just go ahead and release that tension. And again, checking for 90. That looks great. For our pushrod guide tubes, we're going to go ahead and take our pushrod and we're going to cut those to the same length that you see on the etch mark on the bottom surface of our fuselage. So I'm just going to hold this right over here. Just take that right down to the table. And then with just a little drop of glue right in the center, I'm going to start and stop about 1/4 inch from the edge. I'm just going to lay these in place. Let's go ahead and repeat the exact same process now on the other side. Cut those to the same length that you see on the etch mark on the bottom surface of our fuselage. And then with just a little drop of glue right in the center, I'm going to start and stop about 1/4 inch from the edge. I'm just going to lay these in place. There we go. Now with all of our Master Series, there's a very common element, and that is painter's tape here. The painter's tape we love using is basically the 3M blue tape here. It releases really easy. This is what they use oftentimes when they're masking off on a wall and they don't want to pull the paint up. The same thing will be true with your plane here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get a couple pieces of painter's tape ready. And I like to do about maybe 2.5 inches. There we go. I'm going to have those ready here for when I form this together. Now before we go ahead and go much further, I want to just do a practice fold, and if we curled this well, we should be able to easily use the flats of our hands and kind of hold this together so everything lines up nice and neat. And that looks really good. If you're having difficulty doing this right now, go back to the table and continue to round over your fuselage until it's nice and pliable like you see here. Now before we join these together, I'm going to establish a 90-degree angle on the bottom surface of our fuselage, but I'm not going to take the glue all the way to the front former. I'm only going to take it to right about halfway, maybe just a touch beyond it, because what I want to have happen naturally is for the front former to kind of give it a nice rounded look. You'll see why in just a second. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a thin bead of glue, starting and stopping about 1/4 inch from the half. I'm going to take this right up using the table as my friend. I'm going to hold this about 90 degrees. I'm not putting too much attention or care about what's happening over here. I'm just taking from the midpoint here to the back edge. But take your time and make sure that this back edge is pretty much exactly 90 degrees to the skin of the fuselage. We're going to hold this down for about 45 seconds. Same process now on the other side. There we go. All right, so we're pretty much ready to join up our fuselage here, but before we do, we want to do one very important step, and that's actually pre-install our push rods. It's going to be a lot easier to do that right now than it will be later. We're going to first start by gliding the straight edge of our push rod here. We're going to be using the 6.5 inch push rods that are included in your kit. And we're going to guide that through the push rod tube carefully out the other side. And just make sure there's no binding and it glides nice and free. And then we'll grab our other one. Again, the Z bends to the outside. I'm just going to drag that back and forth a little bit. You can see it can almost perfectly guide right on through. Just a touch of help. And there we go. Now when this rolls up, it's going to be nice and straight just like you see here. And we're ready for our next step. Let's go ahead and use that painter's tape that we have. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of pre-tape on the one side in 4 different spots. The tape is going to be really important to kind of hold things together while they dry, and the more time you take to make sure everything aligns properly, the better the finished product is going to look. Alright, so I got my tape on here. We've done our practice folds quite a few different times. We're just going to really concentrate when we fold this together that the leading and the trailing edge line up exactly. You're also going to notice a little tiny cutout right here in the middle where a barbecue skewer is going to pass through, and we want that to line up as well. So we practiced that quite a bit. Now we're ready for some glue. I'm going to start and stop about 1/4 inch from the edge. Put a nice bead of glue. Whoop, kind of missed it a little bit there. And there we go. And I'm actually going to start from the very trail edge because that's where it's going to be under the most pressure. So I'm going to hold that up. I'm going to line that up exactly. Take my time. Once I have it where I want, I'm pushing it together. Roll it over. I'm going to go forward another one. Notice I'm just kind of favoring one side over the other, just barely. I just want to see that we have plenty of time to work with this. There we go. And once you get one side, everything starts falling into place very nicely. I'm going to hold that together. Now at any point that you want to go back and add a little bit more tape just to make sure that you have it, feel free to do so. But we're going to give this plenty of time to dry. Give this at least 3 minutes before we move on to the next step. So our glue is now thoroughly dry here. We're going to go ahead and keep the tape on here just for the time being, just so we don't accidentally kind of overstress it. Now at this point, we should see a nice even fold. If anything's kind of lopsided one way or the other, just kind of move it back and forth with your hands and kind of mold it to make sure that you're really happy with the symmetry on this. Now our next step is we're going to go ahead and just do a quick test fit, and we're going to pass these servo holes through the other side. And we're going to pass our push rods through the former, and we're going to do a quick test fit. Now this will have a little bit of friction, and that's exactly what we want. We're only going to be moving this layer into the fuselage 1 layer of foam thick. The other layer is going to be to join the front portion of the fuselage to the rear. That looks really good. Now that we put this in, let's go ahead and carefully take it out. A little rocking motion is all we need. And then what I like to do is you're going to see kind of like a grooved area here. If I put this on the former, what's going to happen is I push the former in, the glue's going to squeeze out and go in the wrong direction. I'm going to go ahead and kind of focus my hot glue right on the edge here. Taking my time, don't need to rush anything. And I'm just going to put a drop here, a drop in the middle, and a drop on the end. That's going to go ahead and dissipate. Same process as before. We're going to guide the push rods through the holes. I'm going to kind of lift this up. I'm only going 1 layer of foam thick. I'm going to slowly slide this in, Making sure that the little tick mark on the very top is perfectly aligned. That's really important. And there we go. She looks great. We're gonna let this dry for about a minute. So with this dried, we're gonna go ahead and set this aside for now, and we're gonna locate the internal power pod box that you see right here. Let's go ahead and set this down, and we're gonna remove the foam from the cavities on these 4 sections. And also we can pop out that metal. And don't lose any sleep if this little tiny delicate piece breaks off. You can always tape that on later. There we go. Take a moment to make sure that your piece looks just like this, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next step. Now you're going to notice that there's a B-fold on this. A B-fold is where the top or the bottom plate is beside the side plate. So in other words, we're always going to take our B-fold and A-fold references and compare them to the orientation of the top or the bottom plate. Just think B beside, A above. So for a proper B-fold, we're going to leave the bottom plate firmly against the table, and we're going to rotate the side plates up 90 degrees. Go ahead and practice this fold, and especially since this piece is a little bit on the smaller side, make sure that you have no debris keeping you from getting a nice clean fold like you see here. If you have any problems with that, you may need to kind of go back with your razor blade and kind of open this up and remove any kind of scraps that you see. This is one reason why we always kind of go down and we kind of scratch through, making sure that we have a nice clean release of the foam. Once we're happy with that fold, we're going to take our glue gun and we're going to focus most of our glue on the side of the bottom plate, starting and stopping about 1/4 inch from the edge. Again, bottom plates on the table, side plate rotates up 90 degrees next to the bottom plate, and we're going to hold this at 90 degrees for about 45 seconds. Same process on the other side now. We're just going to carefully, with a little rocking motion, get that up to 90 degrees. Make sure that we don't have any kind of extra residual that we may need to remove. And again, we're going to start and stop about 1/4 inch, focusing most of our glue on the side plate. Back onto the table, rotate up 90 degrees, press down firmly against the table. We always have the saying, our table's our friend here. That's because we kind of use the table to kind of help us get that hard edge, so we're not just holding things up in the air, trying to get them aligned. And we're going to hold that down for about 45 seconds till the glue is fully dry. Alrighty, we're just going to go ahead and put this in a position just like that. Make sure we're happy with it. And a little drop of glue on this side, a little drop of glue on the other side. We'll flip it over and pinch it together. I can just come back with a little scrap piece of foam like you see here. Wipe off any extra. And we'll hold this for about 45 seconds. Our next step is to locate our little former that you see. And that little former is going to go ahead and glide right over this box that you just created and glue. Now it's really important that this is going to be established in the proper thrust angle both to the right and also down. You don't want to go ahead and have this be perpendicular to the box. You want to follow the contours of that folded box and make sure they line up exactly. We can always adjust thrust angle by putting washers in the motor, but if you do this step right, your plane should fly nice and true through all the different power settings. That looks really good. So take careful notice here that when I hold this up vertically, that we have quite a substantial amount of down thrust and also to the right. Once we're happy with that, I'm going to go around these 3 sides. You have a little glue squirt out, that's okay. And then I'm just going to kind of open this up. Line it up and push it down. I can also use the table as my friend here, and I'm going to hold that firmly down, and I'm going to push that former down against the table, so hopefully everything lines up beautifully. And you can see just how much down thrust you actually have in this motor. Now that we have our thrust established, let's go ahead and put our attention towards our little wooden firewall. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pop out the wooden X mount, and we're going to save that because that's going to be what our motor is going to fasten to. Pop off all the pieces. Now it's going to probably be hard for the camera to establish here, but we have a little tiny tick mark at the very top and the very bottom of both sides. If you need to use a pen to go ahead and make that mark a little bit more visible, that's fine. I can see it just fine, it's right here. We're going to line this firewall up, and we're going to line that tick mark up with the exact very top of the line right here. Now, this is really important because it's going to kind of help us keep a consistent level of alignment throughout this whole entire build. So take your time and make sure you mark this. Again, you can use a pen if you need to. Once we have this where it's supposed to go, take note on where this is going to actually be gluing down. And then we're going to go ahead and remove this. We're going to put the glue right on here, right around the sides, a little bit right there in the middle. I'm going to find my tick mark one last time. I'm going to press it into place, a little rocking motion, and I'm going to line that up exactly with the former. And then I can take it right back down to the table just to make sure that I kind of have a good squish there, that I'm not letting the thrust angle change at all. And I'm going to hold this down for about 40 seconds. Our power pod box is now done. We're going to go ahead and take our time and we're going to grab our wing here and we're going to join these two together. All right, you're going to see our two main tabs on the rear portion of the box, and that's actually going to fit down very nicely, just like you see here. I'm just going to give a nice even pressure. It's one of my favorite parts about this whole build is just how nice that looks. And there we go. Make sure that when you push this down in that everything is nice and flush. If anything is lifted up, you're going to have alignment issues in the future. Once you're happy with that, we're going to take note on where everything touched. And then I'm going to come back here, put a bead of glue on all the portions. I'll put some glue here, here, the back, and then also on these two little tabs here and here. And then I'm going to press this back down one last time, making sure that everything is nice and flat and aligned properly. Give this a good minute to dry and we'll move on to our next step. All right, so our center section is now dry. We're going to go ahead and put our attention now back on the rear portion. You're going to notice some perforated lines here right on the center of the former. Let's take our razor blade and go ahead and cut those out carefully and remove it. And I'm just going to kind of pop that out. There's one. Just use a barbecue skewer. And there's two. Make sure that you remove the full inside from top to bottom because that's going to be where our center spine is going to go, and we want to make sure it can go all the way back. Speaking of our center spine, this is going to be it right here. Let's go and carefully do a practice test fit. I'll just go and kind of pinch the front here and we'll pass it on through. I'm just going to rock this all the way back and in. A little bit of resistance. We're just going to kind of rub it on the top and the bottom. Almost there. Oops. And there we go. Notice I took my time here just to make sure that we kind of got this pushed back. What this is going to do, this is actually pushing right up against this top ridge right here. And the reason why it gets you a little bit of resistance is maybe this is rounded off just a little bit too round, and then you kind of got to mold this and push this and flatten it out, and the piece will slide in. Now this is going to be a precision fit, so you may find yourself having to kind of crush down on both sides, and also you may kind of have to find yourself molding this up and kind of raising up this by pinching a little bit together. Just remember, just use the flats of your hands or your table as your friend, just so you don't put any dents in it. At the end of the day, you want to see this hash mark here and this very bottom edge perfectly in line with the very edge of this former here. All right, we're happy with this. Once we know that that can slide in successfully to where we want it, let's just go ahead and do a quick test fit here. We're going to slide this under just like you see here, all the way down, and then rock it all the way forward. There we go. Once we're happy with the fit, I'm going to go ahead and glue this into place. Just focusing my glue on the main portions where this is going to touch. I'm going to slide it in one more time. There we go. Don't want to push it in too far. Just going to line up again the edge right on the bottom edge here and the top edge here. It's really important that we get this fully seated down because this is going to control the angle at which the rear section slides into our fuselage. So make sure when you slide this in that everything is lined up and that the hash marks are perpendicular to the bottom portion of the wing. And just for a little added rigidity, I'm just going to go ahead and give this a nice little bead of glue right on the top here on both sides. Carefully push these back here just to where maybe about a 1/4 inch is popping through. Alright, and let's just go ahead and do a quick test fit. So slide this up into place, slide it all the way in, and we can push those through there. There we go. So you may find that maybe your piece doesn't necessarily fit in all the way snug and tight. It could be because your former out here is just pointing out just a little bit too far, or maybe some of these are uneven. If you have any kind of fit issues, you can always trim this down or crush this down a little bit, and the same goes with this former. At the end of the day, when we slide this in, we want a nice flush fit between both the back doublers and the rear former. There we go. Alright, so we're ready for our next step. We're going to go and place glue on the top and bottom of our spine and also some on our rear formers here so it'll glue into the rear former of the fuselage. And I'm just going to go ahead and drizzle a little bit around here. Let gravity be my friend here. Slide this in. Yep, push rods are going in on both sides. And I'm just going to go ahead and carefully just press down into place. All my force is actually going downwards. It's not actually pinching on the rear of the fuselage. I did have a little bit of extra here. I'm just going to wipe off that extra hot glue. And I'm going to hold it there until the glue is fully dry. Alright, this is fully dry now, and you can see that this is incredibly strong now. It's going to get even stronger because our next step is to actually wrap this whole top surface with the outer skin. This is where your fuselage is really going to start taking shape. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and locate our top skin of the front portion of our fuselage here. And just like we did before, we're going to remove the paper off of the intersection of the fuselage. You're going to know the intersection because you're going to see the score lines of where our foldovers are for our battery bay. So let's go ahead and remove that now. And I'm also just going to pop out the center section right here. And we're going to carefully remove the foam on the paper from both sides like this. You're going to see 2 tick marks just like on the rear skin of our fuselage, and we're going to do the same process as we did before. We're going to start right in the middle here. We're going to use the flats of our hands and slowly fold it around and start dragging it through and carefully molding it. I like to use my thumb right around the area where the top detail is going to be here, just to make sure that we don't put a hard crease in this area. So just take your time, a little bit at a time. You can see as time goes on here, everything's taking shape very nicely. Again, we want to make sure that we can easily move without any creasing everything on here. So once we're happy with the form of everything, let's go ahead and just do a quick test fit. And we're going to line up those hash marks. This one's going to go right over the hash mark on the front, lining up. And don't be surprised if you see the firewalls kind of partially covered and partially uncovered. That's because of the thrust angle, and we'll be taking care of that in the future. But I just want to line this up here and slowly roll it down. And what I really want to take note for is just to make sure that this back edge is nice and pretty and that the front edge rolls down nice and neat. And that's looking really good on both sides. So that's great. After we've test fitted it, let's go ahead and take our blue tape and let's tear off plenty of pieces here. We're going to go ahead and put a nice little bead of glue right on the back edge here and also on the front. And we're going to place this tick mark right on the very top of both the front and the back, lining up those tick marks perfectly. Just take your time, we have plenty of time to work with the glue. And what I'm going to do is, just so I don't move this accidentally, And what I'm going to do is once I've lined up these marks, I'm going to go ahead and just tape this down on the back and on the front. So I went ahead and removed the tape now that everything is dried, just so I can get a nice view to make sure as I fold this down, everything's going to be nice and flush and looks good on both sides. So for this next step, I'm going to place glue on the rear former, the bottom portion where the wing is going to meet the outer skin of the fuselage, and also the front former. Make sure that you have plenty of tape and that you're also prepared to hold this for a good while, at least 2 minutes, until it's fully dry. So let's go do that now. There's one bead. Kind of hold my hand in an awkward angle just so we can see it easily on the camera. Bottom former. And there we go. So roll this down. I'll use tape as my friend here. Tape this back portion. Finish rolling that down right on the front. I'm just going to use my hand on the front, then pinch this right where the fuselage meets the wing here. So notice my pinky's kind of over the seam, my other hand's over there. I'm not putting uneven pressure where I'm going to dent the foam. I'm just simply going to hold this like a human clamp for about 2 minutes. Alright, that's one side. Let's go ahead and do the exact same process now on the other side. I'm just going to fold this down, one quick kind of test fit. That looks really nice. And again, this is a lot more awkward to show it so the camera can see it than it is to actually do it. Bead right along the bottom of the wing. And also the front former. I really like the FT300 because it can dial down the temperature so it's nice and thick and it cures pretty fast too, but not so slow. It doesn't take so long that it actually makes you have to rush. All right, that looks really good there. And you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and hold this one. Notice my one finger's kind of holding right over the former. My other finger is kind of pushing down towards the center section of the wing. And then my other hand is actually completing that front former and wrapping it around. And we're just gonna count maybe to 2 minutes. All right, that's looking really good here. I'm just gonna carefully remove this tape right here. We'll use that later. We're going to flip this over on its back, and then we're going to finish off the seam right here on the front. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put a nice long piece of tape right next to me here. And our next step is I'm just going to come in here, put some glue right down over top of this former, down onto the other side. I'm going to hook this tape on this side here, pull that as hard as I can while forming it with the other side. We're just going to glue these two sides together. Don't worry if there's a little gap. Our cowline's going to cover that up here shortly. So we already peeled off these little guys here that were on the sides right here. This is going to be really useful to kind of press this down and to kind of wrap the paper around where we want to really make that battery tray both durable and look nice as well. So let's go ahead and we'll just practice it one time. We'll just push this straight down and in. This is where the Servo or the battery tray is going to go, and then we'll push it down the rest of the way and go inside the battery box. Let's go and do one side and we'll do the other. Glue just right over top of these two formers. I'm gonna wrap this around, kind of press it down in. Don't want to burn our fingers, so that's why we're just using a scrap piece of foam. There we go. A little bit more pressure right there. There's one. And we'll do the other one. I'm going to grab the other piece of scrap foam. This is mostly decorative, but boy does it make the plane look nice. A little bit more glue under here. There we go. All right, now that everything is dry, we're gonna go and put our attention towards our outer cowling piece. Let's just go ahead and peel off one side here. It doesn't really matter which side it is. And again, you're gonna notice that there's a little tiny tick mark at the very, very top. Now, The one thing that we do want to do with this is we are going to have to cut quite an extreme bevel on this side right here. And the reason for that is because as this wraps around the very front of the nose, we're going to need to have that where that extra foam doesn't come in the way and make a gap. So we can do that now or we can do it later. I think I'm going to just do it now while the foam is as rigid as possible. The easiest way to do that is kind of just use a sawing motion, almost as if we're cutting a double bevel. But I'm just going to kind of pull the razor blade towards, almost like I'm trying to saw through it real slowly. Now just keep careful with your fingers and everything. There's just no real easy way to do this. So I'm kind of holding this up for the camera to show you, but the way that you can do it the safest way is just by taking it to the edge of the table and holding it, and then slowly cutting it and shaving it like you see here. That way your hands are nice and clear from the razor blade. And now with our thumb and forefingers, let's just go ahead and give it a nice gentle radius. So it'll wrap around real easily. Notice after I go through it a couple different times how easy and simple it is. When you're done rolling this, you should be able to easily turn this around and connect it without it buckling at all for you. Good. I'm just going to go ahead and carefully remove this blue tape. And I'm going to get myself some fresh tape here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you have any kind of glue globs like what we have right here, just use the edge of your razor blade and kind of use a sawing motion and cut those off. You don't want that getting in the way of gluing your two pieces together. There we go. And starting from the very top, we're just going to kind of do a quick little test fit, see if we have this cut sharp enough. And this is telling me I need to go a little bit deeper on my bevel cut. I'm actually going to take this almost all the way to the other side, really, really shallow. So to give you an idea of just how wide I'm cutting this bevel cut, you can just see how shallow that angle is. So we got our bevel cut, and then when we wrap this around now, you can see that she's matching up much better, nice and flush. I'm just going to start on the one end here. I'm going to start closer to the camera. I'm just going to put a nice little, maybe 1-inch strip of glue. I'm just going to start it right at the center section. And I'm going to start wrapping it around. I'm not going to worry about the rest of it. I'm only going to worry about that. I'm going to follow up with a piece of tape here. I'm going to first start with this one side, tape it to hold in place. And try to make it so it's easy to see here. There we go. And I got a little piece of tape on there, but I'm just going to kind of hold it further down here, just giving it shape. That way the tape's doing its job, but also we're kind of holding it in position until the glue fully dries. We're not going to rush this process. The longer you take your time on this front piece, the better it's going to look. So I'm just going to let this fully cure. And after it's fully cured, I'm going to let it lift up. And then a little bit of glue right on that bottom edge. Right back down to the table. I can even take the same piece, just work it down a little bit further. And again, I'm just going to hold this, kind of mold this into where I want it to go next. So the glue's kind of holding the seam where I want it, and then I'm holding the next piece where I want it to go as well too. So that way when it's fully dried and I release it, it's going to kind of already be at the right angle and at the right position. This is going to keep you kind of from wandering off and having to make any crazy adjustments later on. And I'm just going to take it the rest of the way all around to this half here. Don't worry about that little gap, we can fix that later. Every model is going to be just a little bit different. There we go. And we're going to let that dry. Same process now on the other side. All right, the glue's dried. Same process on the other side. I'm going to kind of get a little bit of drop of glue up here. And I'm just working about 1 inch at a time. Hold this one into place. All right. we'll just finish this off right here. Those two halves met up beautifully. All right, we're gonna let that dry. We're ready to move on to our next step. Now that our fuselage is done, let's go ahead and put our attention towards the tail surfaces here. Let's go ahead and pop out our rudder and our elevator. So with our rudder and our elevator on the leading edge, we are going to have a fold over on each one. You're also going to notice with your rudder here that there's going to be a slot that's about the width of a barbecue skewer. That's going to be because we're going to glue a barbecue skewer in to give the rudder extra durability and also help it hold straight. So let's go ahead and put our attention towards the rudder first, since it's a little bit different. First thing we want to do is to kind of go ahead and cut down on the score line, and then we can use the tip of our barbecue skewer to carefully remove extra foam from that center area. Just drag it on both sides here, and it should kind of just start pulling up. This is just a really thin little scrap piece that'll kind of come out, so you kind of gotta just drag it out like that. Next, we're gonna go ahead and do a test fit here. We'll just take this all the way to the top, make sure we're happy with it, and then we'll go ahead and glue it in. And I'm just going to go ahead and press this all the way down. I'm going to let that kind of sit right in the center of the foam here. I'm just going to follow up with a little scrap piece, wipe off all that extra. There we go. We're going to let that dry for about 45 seconds. Once it's fully dry, we can cut our score cut. We're going to carefully remove the paper that we have here. And just like all of our other foldovers, we're going to put a bead starting and stopping about 1/4 inch from the edge. Take it down to the paper, up vertically, hold it for about 5 or 6 seconds, then down on the other edge, and then I like to just put a little bit of a dragging motion going the other way. We can leave our barbecue skewer long for right now. It's going to be a lot easier to pass this through and kind of find the angle we need to pass this down. And then we can cut it short once we get the rudder glued in. Now this plane can be flown as a bank and yank. In other words, aileron, elevator, no rudder, and throttle. But in this case, we're going to show you how to set up as a 4-channel so you can do all the cool maneuvers that rudder gives you the ability to do. To cut our rudder hinge line in, we're just going to go ahead and take our knife right down the hinge line. You're going to notice that's more of an etch line and not a score cut. So you're going to have to go ahead and take your time, go nice and straight, and cut down through that. You can also use a ruler if you're uncomfortable with doing it freehand. I'm going to fold over both halves, and then we're going to cut a single bevel on the side of the rudder. Notice I'm just kind of using that sawing motion here. Makes it go just nice and slow and controllable. There we go. Always make sure with any kind of control hinge that you have nice free movement on both directions. Got a little scrap right there. I'll pinch that in. Much better. Just like we did on the ailerons, let's do our hot glue reinforcement hinge. Little bit of glue right on that hinge line. Gives it so much strength. And then always make sure we go back and then scrape all of it off. Only glue that should be left is going to be the glue that's pushed into the paper and also into the foam. And then you can dip your finger in water or lick your finger. Just rub it back on both sides. That helps dry it. And now you have nice smooth control. Let's go and put our rudder to the side now, and we're going to go ahead and do a similar process now on the elevator. All right, we don't have any barbecue skewers to put in for reinforcement, so all we need to do is the 2 foldovers. We'll go ahead and just open these up. There's 1, there's 2. Again, we're going to start and stop our glue about 1/4 inch from the edge. Up 90 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down flat on the table, and there's a gentle pull towards you for about a 5 or a 10 count. As you build more and more models, you're going to learn about the right amount of glue that you can put on, just to kind of get the perfect amount of displacement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just push it away from me this time. You can see this one I put too much. All right, let's go ahead and cut our hinge line now. And just like the rudder, we're going to go ahead and cut our bevel, this time on the side of the elevator. Oftentimes, if it has a split elevator, you'll see me actually putting the hinge line on the stabilizer side, not the elevator, and that's so that the center section has as much meat as possible. But since this is a solid one, we don't need to worry about that. All right, same process as before. Reinforcement hinge, thin ribbon of glue right over that paper. Come back with some scraps, wipe off all that extra. There we go. Our elevator and the rudder are now ready to assemble our fuselage. Let's go ahead and cut that slots out and start doing a test fit. Now with our fuselage, you're going to see some dashed lines right on the very back edge. The one thing I want to encourage you not to do is to try to cut perpendicular to the angle of the foam. We got to imagine that the stabilizer and the rudder are going to go ahead and go through vertically and horizontally. So in this case, when we cut this out, keep your plane as flat as possible and keep your razor blade also parallel to the table as well as you cut through. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it is going to make a much nicer fit. So I'm just going to go ahead and rest my left hand on this, and I'm going to keep my razor blade nice and flat. And I'm just kind of use a gentle sawing motion as I go through each dotted line. This is frankly, I think between John and I, this is one of our most satisfying steps, just because it's so much fun to kind of connect the dots with a razor blade. Do that side. And then notice it kind of kicks down for that elevator throw right there. Just gonna go down and follow those lines. Again, keeping everything nice and flat. Do the same process now on the other side. So, pop this out here. And this out here. Let's see how we did. There we go. We'll do a quick test fit on our elevator. And you're going to notice that there's 4 little tick marks, and that's going to be right where it meets the front of the fuselage, and that's going to help us center it up on the rear of the fuselage. So we'll go ahead and slide this in. There we go, that looks really good. And now we can lay this flat on the table, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sight down the fuselage, and that actually looks really, really good. You want to make sure that the wing is perpendicular to the fuselage and also parallel to the split difference on your wing. And if at any time that doesn't look quite right, you can just trim a little bit out of one side or the other, or even take your barbecue skewer and kind of crush down on one side or the other, and that's going to give you the ability to rotate your tail kind of back and forth. But this is looking really good. Alright, I'm just going to do a quick test fit of the tail here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of let this know where it needs to pop through, because most likely, and I did, you end up accidentally kind of gluing that hole shut. So now what we can do is we can pass this tail right on through. I'm just going to kind of wiggle it around, feel for that hole. You can also look right in the back here. And there we go. Open this up, we'll pull this right on down, and then I can straighten out this flap on the bottom. And then we'll sit it down the rest of the way. Alright, so once we're happy with how the tail looks and it's all nice and parallel, let's go ahead and put glue starting at the top. We're going to split the difference between these little tick marks. One last check. Looks nice and perpendicular. And all we need to do is put a thin little ribbon of glue on both sides. Notice I'm not going back to the elevator because we don't want to accidentally glue the elevator to it. And you can always go back if you have any extra, just scrape it off on each side. And we're just going to hold this down for about 30 seconds. There we go. Still nice and straight. Same process now on the bottom. Gonna make sure we're where we want to be, and we are. A little bit of glue here. and a little bit of glue here. And we're just gonna hold this down for about 30 seconds. All right, so our plane's upside down right now. Let's go ahead and do one more step with our tail nice and firmly attached. You're gonna notice that this keel right here is actually gonna be taller than this portion. And what we wanna do is we wanna cut the width of the foam right here. So we're gonna go back here. I'm just gonna make my marks about the width of the foam. I'm gonna make 2 clean slices, just parallel to the center line. Would have put these in as indicator marks, but it would have made it really difficult to get it exactly right because every build in this back area is a little different. There we go. Let's see. So that goes right to the hinge line, and that's great. Also, while we have this on the back, you're gonna see the little hole on the very bottom here. Go ahead and poke that through. Kind of open that up a little bit because that's where the barbecue skewer is gonna go down through the top. Now what we can do is we can pass this right through the top, and I'm just gonna look through this back open cavity, find the hole that I made on the bottom, and then pass it through. And there we go. All right, and to install this, we're just gonna take this all the way down. I'm gonna kind of lift up the elevator nice and carefully as we push this down. It takes just a little bit of finesse. Straighten this down into the keel. There we go. And we're going to take this all the way to the bottom. Now you're going to notice here that this is going to keep our elevator from going down. Once we've glued this in place and trimmed it flush, we're just simply going to take a razor blade and we're going to cut off that excess. This is going to make it nice and strong for us and also make sure that lower rudder doesn't get damaged. All right, so let's just go ahead and sight down this. It looks actually beautifully perpendicular. And same process as before. I'm just gonna kind of creep this up just a little bit. And I'm gonna put a bead of glue on both sides. I'm gonna press it down into place. So you can see right now our elevator does not have much throw at all, and we're going to change that in just a second here. We're going to use our razor blade and we're going to trim off this top bevel and carry this line down on the rear portion of our fuselage, and then also trim the underneath part. We want to make sure we have full deflection both up and both down. Now we can kind of come back with our little side cuts. Do this little cut. And if it pops up more than you like, just use a little bit of a sawing motion. And finish off with a drop of glue. And scrape it flush. All right, any extra residual here that you want to trim off of your rear elevator, you can do so. Make that nice and flush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put a bead of glue over the whole thing, and then once again take a scrap piece of foam, push it right down in there, and that's going to lock it in nicely. All we need to do to cut off the extra, we take our razor blade nice and flat, with a little bit of a saw motion here, trim that portion out. There's one. There's down. Now we can hold this down. Be careful to keep our fingers away. We use another saw motion. And we'll trim our elevator up. So our next step, now that we have our tail surfaces in, we're going to install our servos and our control horns. We're going to first start with our control horns. We have 2 of these left. You guys may see that the kit includes a couple mini firewalls. Just put those aside for a future build. You're going to notice that the arm kind of naturally just meets on the low side, and that's what we want. We don't want any kind of resistance on this at all. So I'm going to put this on, a little rocking motion, and I'm going to go ahead and press this carefully into place through the slot. A little rocking motion is all you need. Don't worry about this little tiny groove here. We're going to trim that once we get everything in. The important thing is that you have your control horn in right where it's in line with the hinge line like that. So before we move forward with anything else, let's go ahead and center up our last two servos that we have. Again, these are going to be the servos that we use for our Power Pack A's and our Power Pack F's. If you buy the Power Pack A or F kit, they're going to be included in there. And just like our ailerons, we're going to be choosing the four-sided control horn, and we're going to cut off three sides with it. 1, 2, 3. We can hook this up to our servo centering tool. As long as you don't move these servos, they actually come pre-centered from the factory. That's one reason why we love them so much. So you don't have to do this step. But if you accidentally bump it at any time, you may find yourself actually having to do an adjustment later on. So it's just easier just to kind of confirm it, center it out. We'll take our little servo arm screw, just drop it right into the top. And then screw it down. Gonna kind of brace the arm with my thumb so that way the full torque of that servo doesn't get transferred to the gears. And then one last little test, we'll just put it on automatic. There we go, perfect. All right, so that's one. Let's set up the other one. We're gonna have our arms actually pointing in the opposite direction. So if this one's pointing to your right, we're gonna do the same process, except this time we're gonna make the other one point to the left. And just like our ailerons, we're gonna be choosing the four-sided control horn, and we're gonna cut off three sides with it. And that one's centered. You may notice that the servo on one side is slightly forward or slightly backward. That's not a big deal, it's just from the odd number of teeth. So you can see that we have both of our servos centered up nice and neat. Our next step is to go ahead and install those into our fuselage. Really easy way to kind of grab these through the fuselage is to take your extra servo push rod material from your ailerons, and I just bend a little hook. And oftentimes I'll always keep these around my workbench because they work really good. This little top hatch on the top is not only useful for a cool decoration, but you can also reach it right down in there and actually pop it up to grab your servo arms. So I'm going to pop this one through the one side, carefully bring it on down. Whoops. There's the one side. I'm just going to go ahead and lightly press this down into place for the time being. And let's do the exact same process now on the other side. And then there's the other side. So the first step for routing the wires for the elevator and the rudder servos, I'm going to go ahead and pull the leads through so they pop out the top of the fuselage. Once I have those servos set down into place, I'm going to flip them over again. I'm going to use my little tiny push rod hook that we made. And I'm just simply going to grab them again, and this time I'm going to pull them up through here. And that's going to be the area where our receiver or our FT Aura 5 is going to go. Now all of our wires are exactly where we can locate them. So in our kit we have two control horns remaining. We're just going to go ahead and lay this down and make sure that the whole of the control horn lines up with the hinge line. Now don't worry about the way it touches on the corner of the fuselage. We're going to take our blade and we're actually going to trim that back here in just a moment. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hold this servo arm or control horn exactly where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and neutralize this out. And the hole that we're going to be using for this is actually going to be the one closest to the servo. Now a lot of people think more throw is going to give you a better flight, and especially with these minis, you want the throws to be proper. So go ahead and follow this. You can always dial it up more later if you want more throw. Now I'm just going to hold this over, and just to kind of make it easier to see where I need to bend, I'm just going to put a little dot right over where the push rod needs to go through the servo horn. I'm going to lift this up. And we're going to bend this up, straight vertical. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab it about 3 millimeters up. I'm going to bend it straight towards the center section of the wing. And just like we did before, this is a modified Z-bend. We want to turn it to a normal one, so I'm going to cut this. And we'll grab it and slowly rotate it 90 degrees. Now I can carefully rock this up. I'm going to pass it through that closest hole. I have bigger hands, so it's a little bit more trying, but it honestly is a very simple process. And there we go. Let's go do the exact same process on the other side, then we'll recenter our servos, make sure everything's right, and then we'll lock it down with some hot glue. Push this in real quick, right there. Make sure that our control surface is nice and neutral, which it is. And then I'll just take my marker again, line it up with the closest hole possible, put a very light little dot. Carefully lift it up. Go to vertical. Grip it about 3 millimeters ahead of that bend. Go to horizontal. Cut it. And then we'll carefully bend it. Pop the servo out. There we go. There we go. And then we'll set it right back down in place, just taking up the extra slack as we push it in. And before we lock everything down, we'll recenter our servos. Once we have everything centered and we're happy with everything being nice and neutral, we're going to go back to our servos and also our control horns and lock them in with glue. First, we're going to start with our servos. Just going to lift this up out of the way. Little bead of glue. There we go. We'll just hold that into place. We'll do the same on the rudder. And then with our servos, I'm simply going to go ahead, put a bead of glue right on the top surface here, on both sides. Press it down in there. Once we put our hot glue down, I'm just going to hold these servos firmly down in position, make sure everything stays nice and neutral. We're going to hold that for about 2 minutes. For the top hatch detail on our Zero, we're going to go ahead and remove the center piece of paper, along with also between the two score lines. We're also going to crack open and remove the foam so we have the paper exposed like this. Using the included barbecue skewer, we're going to go ahead and kind of crush down on both sides here, so as we roll this up, we're going to get a nice soft radius. Do this on both sides. Don't try to crush this all at one time. Just go ahead and let the foam slowly crush down. And at the end, it should look like this. Once we're happy with the way it looks, simply gonna fold this over. We're gonna use a table as our friend. We're gonna hold this down at 90 degrees and give it a good 45 seconds until it's thoroughly dry. Same process on the other side. Bead of glue, let it roll over nice and soft, and then hold it in place. Our last detail will be just to go ahead and put a bead of glue right on the front and then fold this over. Just going to roll this over, just kind of give a little bit of radius, let it kind of crush in. There we go. This is just to cover up the edge of the white paper in the front. Let's go ahead and do a quick test fit. This should slide right under our canopy, go all the way back, and then press this down into place. Now when we slide this hatch in, we should just be just on the inside of the cuts here, and it should give a beautiful finished look. Now this front nose here should just be a little bit lower, and it's going to be a little bit different for every model based on how you rolled your fuselage. The way we want to adjust this is we want to actually trim this down so this part here is almost just about flush right here with the top of the fuselage. So all I need to do is take my razor blade, and what I'm just going to do here is I'm just going to cut a little bit of a gentle bevel on both sides. This is going to match up really nicely with the fuselage and let it sink in just a little bit deeper. There we go. Now once we get our electronics in, we're gonna go ahead and fasten this down with a little drop of glue. So if it has a little bit of springiness and kind of pops up, don't worry about that. We can get the final fit just perfect right before we glue it down. At this point, we're ready to move on to our next step. The next piece we're gonna put our attention to is gonna be our little wing fillets right here. Now these are gonna mirror each other and they're gonna fit right in this area that you see here. You're gonna notice without beveling these, it's just gonna pop up. So what we wanna do now is we wanna cut a nice deep bevel on both surfaces here and here. So I'm just gonna take this to the edge of the table and cutting away from me, just in a sawing motion. Kind of do it backwards for the camera here. Just gonna cut a majority of that out. Nice deep bevel. There's one side. There's the other. And I'll flip it around in the meteor spot. There we go. Let's go ahead and give this a quick test fit and see how it looks. And that's exactly how we want it, just like that. I'm going to place my glue. I'm going to keep it far away from the paper, and I'm just going to go right on the top here, right to the point. Try to keep as little from squeezing out as possible. And we'll place it into place. We'll put it in place. And then I'll just use the tips of my finger to kind of hold it down. We're going to do the same process now on the other side. Alright, so this is going to be mirrored. So I'm just going to hold this up in place, just kind of make sure I know where I want to cut it. Okay, we're going to do nice deep bevel cuts here. There's one side. There's the other. And I'll flip it around in the meteor spot. I'm going to place my glue. I'm going to keep it far away from the paper, and I'm just going to go right on the top here, right to the point. And we'll place it into place. And then I'll just use the tips of my finger to kind of hold it down. All right, so our wing fillets are now done. Let's go ahead and put our attention towards the canopy. All right, I'm just going to carefully kind of use my razor blade to cut this away from the piece, just because so many pieces are very thin and delicate. So you're going to notice that we have three main pieces for our canopy. The first is going to be our three nested pieces for the rear portion of the canopy. The next is going to be the front portion, and the top is going to be the plug, the little tiny hole that's left over, and give it that last little scale detail. Now to kind of keep this area stronger so we don't accidentally break it from the tabs, I'm just going to take a piece of painter's tape and run it right over the top of the finished side of the canopy. It's going to give us just a little extra support while we form it. There we go. And then now I can go ahead and I can just remove these bottom surfaces right here. Now using our thumb and forefingers, we're going to carefully just kind of rotate up and do the same process that we've been doing on our wings and our fuselage, just kind of establishing a nice curved angle, slowly, a little bit at a time. Notice I'm not putting any kind of sharp pressure on here, I'm just kind of rolling it around, trying to take that shape. Same on the next one. It's a lot easier to do this before we start gluing it together. You can see as we roll this together, it'll take shape very nicely. Let's do the last one here. Kind of roll it together. There we go. And I'm just going to get myself a couple extra pieces of painter's tape here. So my next step here is I'm going to kind of roll this together, push these together nice and firm. I'll do one side. And there's the other side. I'm going to keep a little scrap piece of foam by me. Simply put a bead right down in here. Then using the foam, I'm going to press it right into that seam. Kind of paint over it. And we're going to let that dry for about 1.5 minutes. And once this is feeling nice and dry here, and we can kind of let it open up, we don't want to lose that shape that we're going to need. So I'm just going to go ahead and take another piece of painter's tape. I'm just going to kind of carefully fold it over a little bit more than what we actually need it to be, just so we can kind of use this shape for our next piece that we're going to put on. So now I can easily just grab this with both hands. I can roll it down in, and I can press it into place. So it actually feels really good. Just going to go ahead and take my tape here. Go to one side. Then the other. Then I'm kind of just pushing my nozzle down into those seams. The heat of the hot glue is going to open it up just a little bit. And then pressing it in with that scrap piece is really going to help just force that glue down in that seam. And then the tape's going to hold it together. Again, we're going to give this about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes to dry. Alright, that's looking really good. I'm going to go ahead and put this aside right now. And we're going to put our attention towards the little front piece here. What we want to do here is we want to just cut a couple double bevels so that we can match it up with the surfaces that you see here. So I'm just going to kind of use my razor blade, and in a sawing motion, I'm just going to cut some bevels and then pop them out. These pieces are so small, it's kind of difficult to be able to just kind of do a double bevel in the conventional way, but this works out really well. Now we're not going to put much attention right now to what this inner structure looks like. All we really need to concentrate is by putting this piece on this side, letting it dry, and then doing the same on the other side. So let's go ahead. We have a little piece of tape ready to go here. I'm just going to put a little bead of glue right there. And I'm going to hold this in place for about 1 minute. Alright, there's one side. Same process on the other side. Just a bead of glue right down here. We'll worry about getting everything centered up here in a second. And I'm going to hold this in place for about 1 minute. Once this is fully dry, we can carefully remove our pieces of tape here. You'll see we end up with a really nice looking clean canopy. As this opens up, you're going to see that this piece is going to center up quite nicely. And what we can do now is we can kind of hold this in place to where all the angles mirror each other on both sides. And our last step here is we're just going to take a bead of glue on each seam. And looking from the top down, we're just going to hold this so everything looks nice and symmetrical. May mean that we have to push in a little bit on one side or push out on the other side a little bit. And there we go. Now if we try to just fit this down here, you're going to notice that it doesn't fit because we got to bevel the edges. Now I'm just going to carefully remove any extra foam that we don't need, which means a nice deep bevel cut right along the edges here. I like to kind of use a sawing motion here. Whenever I hit that hot glue, it just cuts right through it. Don't worry if you accidentally knock any glue joints loose or anything and need to kind of reseal it. Totally fine. Just go back with a little piece of painter's tape. A little bit more right here. Let's see how she's fitting. Maybe a little bit of work right here at the back edge. Our last little piece to go in is our little guy right here. We're just going to kind of carefully chew away as much foam from all four sizes as possible. Give it a little test fit here, and it'll pop in just like that. I want to favor most of the glue here, just so I don't burn my fingers. And press it down into place. I'm just going to hold that there for about a minute. Now for our canopy, it's going to be really important that we take note of where this back seam is, and specifically the little tiny hash mark that we've been using to line up our fuselage pieces. We're going to line our canopy just in front of that hash mark, just as you see right here. You're also going to notice that the front seam of the canopy lines up right where the back side of our top hatch is. Once you're happy with that, all we simply need to do is focus our glue right on the top of the hatch. We'll line it up just like we did before. Check that front seam, and then we'll hold it down in place for at least 45 seconds. So our last couple pieces are going to be our bottom battery hatch and the front latch here. So go ahead and locate in your kit the two pieces that look just like this, and we're going to go ahead and prepare those. So these pieces here are going to be a fold over, so we're simply going to guide our razor blade down the score cuts on both sides and then remove the excess. Same is going to go with the front. Now you're going to notice that there's a couple holes here and here, and then also on the very bottom of the fuselage that you see right here. This is actually for optional magnets if you guys choose to put them in. Now we're going to have an Amazon link down below for you that if you want to put these magnets in, you can. They're incredibly strong. They really make removal of the battery hatch really simple, but the same thing can also be done with the included Velcro within your kit. If you choose to do the little permanent magnets, all you simply need to do is fasten them down in here. Easiest way to do that would be to simply pop out the little bit of foam that you have, fill the area with glue, and then press the magnet down nice and flush. Make sure when you do the other side you get the opposite polarity, or else your hatch is going to repel itself instead of attach together. We'll go ahead and do the other side. Just going to go ahead and pluck out that foam, fill the area with some hot glue. Let's see, that side goes that way, so I'm just going to go ahead and flip it the opposite. Just to kind of make things work out and pull up towards the top, I'm just going to slide this right on the top. And that's going to hold the magnet right up to the surface. Give this a good minute to dry. There's one. There's two. You can see they're nice and neat up into the surface. I'm going to go ahead and fold this over with a bead of glue. I'm going to give a little bit extra because we have a little bit more of a fold over than normal. We're going to go up 90 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we're going to go down, sealing in those magnets, and then just a gentle pull, putting tension on that paper. Same process on the sides now. Let's do a quick little practice. Again, we're going to start and stop our bead of glue about 1/4 inch from the edge. Up 90 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Down to the table. And then press and drag. To the other side. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down to the table. Press and drag. And let's go ahead and do the back surface. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got a little generous on that one. No problem. There we go. This little crease in the center is going to just be a little bit of a fold where we can rotate this up. And we're ready to test fit this inside of our airplane. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove these magnets for just the time being here. We're going to press this down right into the front. And what we should hopefully see is a nice friction fit, just like you see here. Use the thumb hole. Once we're happy with that, we can go ahead and glue our little tab on the front here. And I'm just splitting the difference on this tab here. While we're putting our attention towards this hatch, an easy way to make this hatch easy to remove is to take about 2 inches of tape. We're going to fold over the top half of an inch like a tab. And then we're going to put the sticky portion on the very back of the hatch, so that way we have something that we can easily pull from. This is actually going to be a breather hole for us, but it's also going to be a spot for our thumb to go if we want to give it a good launch. Let's just do a quick little test fit here. That feels really good. I'm actually going to need to do a little bit of carving on the very front here. Maybe just a little bit of the front cowl to get that nice precision fit. Every plane's going to be just a little bit different. These little adjustments is really what's going to make it nice. Now we got a little bit of a gap here. I can actually take a scrap piece of foam. So lay a little bit of hot glue in there. And I'm just going to put a little bit on the paper. And we can do a nice little touch up, just like that. And once that's dried, we'll just cut it off. If we're going to be using the magnet option here, our next step would be to actually just scoop out our 2 little pieces right here. Just pop those out again. Put 2 drops of glue. We're going to identify what polarity we want, just like this. And then this is going to be the bottom portion. So we're just going to take it from here, pop one down, and then pop the other down. So once this is dried, we can peel off a little bit of paper from a scrap piece of foam, cover that up, glue it down, and she'll be ready to go. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to kind of put some glue right over top of that. Lay our paper down. We'll let that dry and we'll cut off the excess. So now when we put our hatch on, she sticks wonderfully. Now, if you don't want to use magnets, there's no problem with that. We actually include in our kit some Velcro. All you have to simply do is cut off about a 1/2 inch like this. We'll stick the fuzzy on the one side, and then we'll stick the prickly on the other. And you get the exact same results. All right, so now that our airframe is pretty much done, we're gonna go ahead and put our attention towards the motor and the ESC. For this, we're gonna be using our Power Pack F. Now, if you're new to flight tests, we have every one of our power systems labeled from A all the way to F. And this is gonna give you the ability to have one common power pack size, but also be able to hop those motors and electronics from one plane to the other in a similar size and performance bracket, so you don't have to buy a new electronic set for every single airplane that you ever build. And the thing I like about our power packs is this is gonna give you the ability to have one power pack, but then to have a long lifetime being able to go from one experience to the other and grow in the hobby. All right, so the power pack we're gonna be using is our Power Pack F. This is what it looks like. You're gonna see everything's kind of labeled on the front of what it is. Let's just go ahead and open it up. All right, It comes with this really cool plastic case that reseals and also nests with other cases, so as you get more power packs, I love putting my tools and different hardware in there. And also you're gonna see when you open it up, you're gonna have your motor, the servos, and when you lift this up, we got a whole bunch of other goodies here. We have our props, we have our ESC right here, we have our extensions, our tools, and everything you need to complete the experience. So we'll go ahead and close this out. Already used the servos here, so we can put those to the side. You're not gonna need that. And let's pop open our motor. Now the cool thing about the Power Pack F is here, this can actually be run on a 3-cell or a 4-cell. Now the prop that's included, which is a 6.3 prop, is specifically made for a 3-cell. But if you want to go 4-cell, all you need to do is go down 1 inch in diameter and add a blade. So you'll go to a 5-inch 3-blade prop, and it'll give you an amazing experience. That prop isn't included. We're going to be flying this totally stock here, and we'll be able to show you the experience from that. Along with this, we also have our prop nut, and then we have our hardware to mount the engine. It's always really important whenever you're mounting the engine to a firewall, whether it's our wooden firewalls or an X mount, always use the shortest screws possible and make sure you don't put the screws into the windings. Oftentimes our motors come with different lengths depending on what kind of application you're going to use. Only use the screws that are just long enough to bite into the threads but not go all the way through the motors. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use these shorter ones, and then I'm going to take my X mount right here and I'm going to fasten on my motor. This is a little bit different from our classic mini power pods. We don't need to build a mini power pod, and we did this design for a special reason here. We want lots of open room inside the fuselage, and also we want this to be able to breathe easily. And if you ever want to swap your electronics, it's simply 4 little screws and you can pull out the whole power system and then drop it into another airplane or service your system. So let's go ahead and first line up the 2 holes. And you're going to see we have a 16 and 19 millimeter spacing here. So we're going to rotate this 90 degrees until we see the 2 bigger outer holes line up. And that's going to be just like that. And then we can go ahead and install our screws. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and then thread 1 screw through first. And you're going to see you have a 16 millimeter and a 19 millimeter. A lot of times people think that this is actually both even distance. They're like, my motor mount doesn't fit. All you need to do is just rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm just going to line this up. I just always use like an exposed thread there just to kind of get it started. And I don't tighten it down until both sides are thoroughly threaded all the way in. Just makes it easier that way. And biting. There's 1, and then there's 2. Alright, so our motor's installed. We're going to have a couple extra. You only need 2 for this, so we're just going to lay this over here. These 2 smaller holes on this firewall are actually meant for a Power Pack A. Now you can get a really good flying experience out of the Power Pack A. You'll almost get vertical and it'll be almost like a trainer for you. If you have a smaller Power Pack, go ahead and feel free to build this. Just know that you're not going to get that crazy speed or that 4-cell capability. Let's go ahead and grab our ESC. If you guys are new to flight test also, our ESCs are pretty special. We actually mix both the quad world and also the airplane world to come up with this 20 amp ESC. This is also 4-cell capable and it's very, very powerful. We also include a little accessory plug here, and this is going to give you battery voltage. So say you have a 3-cell battery in here, you're going to get a 3-cell output here. This is going to be really good if you have FPV gear or you want to run lights or anything. You can actually plug it right into this. Now, just keep in mind though, if you plug something like a 4-cell into here, you're going to have a 4-cell output voltage, which is roughly 16.8 volts. If you do that and say plug in something like LED lights or an FPV system that's only rated up to 12.6 volts, you could burn it up. But this accessory port is really useful because it actually keeps the clutter down inside your airplane, but still gives you the ability to add extra options. So let's go ahead and plug in these 3 guys. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. And I'm going to take my little servo testing thing, I'm going to turn it to manual. And this time I'm going to go ahead and plug it just how we normally would. And I'm going to turn this all the way down to 0. It's always a lot easier to get the motor spin the right direction before you install everything, because then when you get it put in, all the fun begins where you just get to go ahead and hook up the electronics, put the prop on, and go fly. So I got this turned down to 0. I'm going to turn this or plug this in. 3 beeps. There we go. And we'll run it up. Now, an easy way to tell which way the prop is going is to simply take a piece of tape, fold it around like that. I'm just going to hold this here. I'm going to turn this up. and you're going to see that the motor is running clockwise. Now it's really important for this that we actually have this running counterclockwise, and the reason is because we have the thrust angle all dialed in for a counterclockwise prop. This is typical with any kind of tractor style aircraft that you almost always run with a counterclockwise prop unless you're running 2 motors. So to fix this, all I simply need to do is pick any 2 of the 3 leads and swap them. Now you're going to see when I run this up, that's exactly how it should be running here. So we got this running in the right direction. Let's go ahead and install it in the airplane. So installation for this is really easy. I'm just going to lift up this little hatch, slide it forward, and then I'm going to go ahead and snake my ESC right on through. I'm going to pull this right up through the top, right here, all the way through. And next I'm going to go ahead and rotate this just so basically the leads are going to the top corner, either the top left or the top right. If you remember earlier in the build, I was saying save those servo screws. This is where we're going to be using them now. We're going to go ahead and take our wood grain servo screws. So there's 1, 2, and 3, 4. And we're going to go ahead and just pre-thread, just like we did with our motor, all 4 of these screws, just leaving just the tip, just like that, sticking out on the other side. Now, as I was talking before earlier in the build, we talked a lot about how important the thrust angle is for this. It is possible if, say, you accidentally squared this off or you didn't get quite enough thrust angle because maybe the firewall wasn't lined up perfectly with the very edge of your power pod box, then maybe you need a little bit more down. The easiest way to adjust your thrust angle if that has to happen is simply by actually unscrewing your motor and putting washers behind here to fine-tune that thrust angle. And that's only if maybe you accidentally just had maybe a little bit too much glue and maybe flatten that out. But this is adjustable very easily. But if you follow along with the build, you should have no problem. Next, I'm just going to kind of let this favor up in the top corner. I'm just going to move this around until it lines up with the holes. There it goes. And I'm going to start each one very, very carefully. And then once I get it through, I'm just going to screw all 4 sides down one at a time. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. Alright, you can see very easily now there's lots of open space for air to flow through the fuselage, keep your electronics nice and cool, and then evacuate through the bottom. So we got this done. Let's go ahead and dress this now. Our little top hatch serves a really cool purpose here. We're actually going to be able to fold this right under, and there's a little top shelf that our ESC is going to be able to go onto. And just like before, we'll pass this right up from the bottom. We'll snag our little wire. Don't pull too hard, just a nice gentle pressure will bring it right up to you. This is going to be the last of the wires that you're going to need to be able to hook up your electronics. One thing I'll do just to keep things nice and tidy, I'll just take my little piece of tape, tape the wires for my ESCs just to kind of stay on the side so I don't snag them. And then you can slide this right back in. And once you're happy with it, I'm just going to put a little drop of glue on each corner. Our motor and our ESC are now installed. Let's go ahead and install our receiver. Now that it's time to put our electronics in, I'm going to go ahead and just put a conventional 6-channel receiver in here. Now this is going to be the same setup whether it's a Spectrum, FR Sky, any kind of receiver that you have. The important thing is to make sure that not all channel mapping is the same. So in this case, channel 1 is my throttle, channel 2 is my aileron, channel 3 is my elevator, 4 is rudder. And then after that we have gear and auxiliary. This model specifically is designed to be able to take up to a full-size 6-channel receiver, or it'll actually accept our Aura board. Now if you guys are new to the hobby or you want to be able to fly in windier conditions and still have smooth flight, we're going to have a separate video for both the Corsair and the Zero on how to install the Aura board. Both of these have been designed to allow space to actually easily take the Aura board and keep it nice and clean and tidy. So I'm going to show you how to use a conventional receiver, and then also the link for that Aura board is going to be down below. Only takes about 5 minutes to set up and you don't need to use a computer. So let's go ahead and flip this over. And this is where we may need our little servo tester to kind of help us out a little bit. So for this setup, I'm going to go ahead and do something very simple. If you have a programmable transmitter, I'm going to set up this airplane for a 2 aileron setup. In other words, each aileron is not going to wire together to one signal through the included power Y harness. It's actually going to go into 2 separate channels. This is going to give us the ability to custom tune each side of the aileron, but more importantly, it's going to keep everything nice and clean inside the airplane. Every different manufacturer is a little bit different. For the Spectrum, all I'm going to do is go into setup, and I'm going to go to my aircraft type, and I'm going to go to dual aileron, and I'm going to select it. And for my ailerons, it looks like my other aileron port is an aux1, which is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass this right under here, and I'm going to plug this aileron into port number 2, and you're going to see that the data is on the very top here. Where it says data on the top, that means our data line pins are on the top. So that means we're going to want either our white or our yellow lines on the top. So there's port number 2. Just going to go past my ESC wire, which is the thickest wire. I'm going to plug that into port number 1. Again, making sure that my signal wire is on the very top. If you get that backwards, don't worry, it's not going to break anything. You're just not going to get any function out of that controller port. This guy right here is going to go into port number 6. That's our other side of the aileron. And then I'm just going to go ahead and check the length here. Just give this a tug. That's on this side, and that is my rudder. So rudder's going to go into number 4. And the last one here should be on this side, and that is my elevator. And we're just going to plug this in. And there we go. Now I can kind of just tuck this down in here. We include Velcro with our kits. If you guys want to use just a little piece of Velcro to kind of tuck that in, but John did a really great job making sure that there's tons of room. Even though it's a small airplane, there's tons of room either for a conventional 6-channel receiver, or in this case in the future, an FT or a 5. So that's good. We got our little bind plug exposed. I'm going to go ahead and back out of this. Shut this off, and we're going to bind this up and get our controls working. Now for our little Spectrum here, all I have to do is I got to power this on. I'm going to push down this button, plug this in at the same time, and you're going to see our flashing little bind light. You may not need to do this if you've already bound your radio. And I'm just going to go ahead and bind this real quick. Holding it far away. There's my flashing. And there we go. Awesome. And all my controls are working. So now that we have everything moving here, notice I haven't put on the prop. It's a very important thing that you don't put on your prop until you're ready to fly. This is going to keep you from accidentally having anything reversed and potentially hurting yourself. So our next step here is to make sure all of our controls are moving the right direction. Now I'm going to position this in the camera the way I'd like you to orientate it. In this case, it'd be with the tail closest to you. And I'm going to go ahead and move my elevator and my ailerons and my rudder. Pull back off the elevator, it should go up. In this case, it does. And while we're at the elevator, I'm going to go ahead and move it towards my aileron. If I move my aileron to the right, my right aileron should go up. And in this case, it does. And the last thing to check out is my rudder. When I move that to the left, this does. Believe it or not, we don't have to do any adjustments when it comes to actually changing the throws on this. If you did have one of these backwards, what you need to do is go into your radio and hit reverse on that channel. And once you do that, you're good to go. All right, our throttle's obviously working. This is now also a good time to go ahead and dial any sub-trims that you may need. Now my elevator's just a little up on the high side, so I'm gonna go ahead and zero that out. And my rudder's just a little bit off. There we go. So now she's nice and centered up. If you guys followed along with the servo arms and you have it at the same throws, this should be perfectly dialed in to give you a really exciting and awesome experience. One thing I am going to adjust is my dual rates and my expos. I'm going to leave my dual rates at 100%, but I am going to dial 30% expo in, and that's going to give us a nice smooth flight characteristic. Now again, every radio is different, so make sure you check your manual, because sometimes to get a softer center section, you have to go into a negative number like on Futaba. So don't just take this video for granted. I'm working on a Spectrum. FR Sky or Futaba could very well be different, or Jumper, or many of the other ones. So just make sure you check out your manual, but follow along like I'm doing here. All right, our throws look good. All right, to fasten our battery, we're gonna use a piece of the included Velcro with our kit. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut about 1 inch worth right off here. Now, you don't want to put so much Velcro on that it's going to be impossible for the battery to come off. You want to put just enough to hold it, but at the same time you can kind of reach in there and pop it out. Now, a really cool trick is if you have a small cockpit like this and you need to get it out, take a gift card or a credit card and slide that in between the Velcro and the battery, and it'll actually release really nicely and pop right out in your hand. So let's see, I got prickly on my battery. We'll do fuzzy on the fuselage. So I'm just going to stick that right on the side here. And for this 800 milliamp battery, I'm going to have this right up all the way in the nose to get my proper center of gravity. So we'll just go ahead and slide this in. And there we go, just like that. And for checking our center of gravity, we're going to go about 1.5 inches back from the leading edge, right about there. So right where the one spar is. And when I balance that upside down, you're going to see it's just a touch nose down, and that's exactly where we want it. Now you can adjust that battery forwards and backwards to get the center of gravity that you like to fly with most. Always make sure that you favor a little bit nose heavy for your first flights, because it's a lot easier to adjust for that than to try to fly a tail heavy airplane, especially a small one. And this is the first time we've ever actually included in our speedboat kits a full-blown decal kit to really recreate a lot of those scale details that's really hard to do on a DOI airplane. We're going to paint this up, we're going to decal it, and then we're going to have a beautiful piece of flying art. Now for both our Corsair and our Mini Zero, we're going to start including decal kits that are going to give you the ability to have that extra scale appearance with a very little amount of work. This is really going to make your plane both look beautiful and fly beautiful. Along with that also, we include a couple really cool souvenir stickers that you'll be able to use for your toolbox or your workbench. These are our first two models to have these stickers, and we really look forward to doing this more on our future designs. All right, so our airframe's now done, everything's dialed in. We're ready to go take this out for a maiden or paint it. In this case, I'm gonna go ahead and put this under paint, get the decals on so she looks really good, and we're gonna send her in the air. All right, friends, it's a beautiful day out here. We're gonna go and put this up for the maiden. Now, if this is the first time you guys have ever made an airplane, or you just kind of want a refresher, we have a really good video called 6 Quick Tips for a Successful First Flight. This is gonna teach you the basics of making sure you check your center of gravity, the control throw of the airplane, make sure your battery's fully charged, and making sure you launch in the wind, along with the other couple key tips. Right now, I've got my center of gravity done. All my controls are set. We did that back at the shop. I'm just gonna go ahead and give this an easy underhand toss and take it around, give you a couple pointers, and having the best experience possible. So for launching this, I like to keep my control stick on my right hand here, and I'm just going to go ahead and use my chin. I'm going to bump the throttle up to about 2/3 throttle. I'm going to give this a nice underhand toss about maybe 30 degrees up into the wind. Wind's coming this way. And there it is. Now I don't have any aura on this. I want to show you guys that these planes are designed to be beautifully stable and fly amazing without any need for stabilization. Now, if you do fly in windier weather, it's definitely a bonus to go ahead and to have the aura on there. I'm just cruising out just below half throttle on a 3-cell battery. Here's a full throttle pass. Look at that. Get it back for you. So a lot of times people think more throw means more control, and actually more throw, especially on these smaller models, can actually cause things like high speed stalls and bad flying performance. If you guys followed along and have the same throws that I do, you're gonna have the same docile characteristic. Look at that. John did an amazing job kind of picking the perfect size airplane where he still gives scale details, but all the general characteristics we want in our Mighty Mini series. Whenever you're flying a Mini, you don't want to fly the prop, you do want to fly the wings. But for most warbirds this size, they're just typically very unstable because of the higher wing loading. This is light as a feather and really flies amazingly scale. Now, whenever you set up for a landing, make sure that you point it into the wind, and keep in mind that this plane is going to glide very well for its small size here. So make sure you have plenty of room, make a nice long approach, throttle back, and then just keep bleeding off the speed until you're just about to touch the ground. A full up input right before you touch the ground with no more speed is going to make you settle in beautifully. Reds, I want to thank you for being part of the Flight Test family, and thank you for spending the time here to build along with this Mighty Mini Zero. If you'd like the build experience of this Mighty Mini Zero, please check out our Mighty Mini Corsairs and many other Master Series style airplanes to come in the future. Also, a huge thanks to our Tech Channel Partner JLCPCB. We're really excited to partner with JLCPCB because they can actually take your circuit board designs and make them a reality. If you're interested in that, there's a really cool link below that can send you to their site and give you more information. Make sure you subscribe for the next build video, and we'll see you next time.